What did I just watch? I'll tell you what I watched. I watched Batman Returns, the second film in the 80s and 90s Batman film series. The second one directed by Tim Burton. And yeah, this one rightfully gets somewhat of a bad reputation as the black sheep of the old Batman movies. A lot of people are really put off by it, which I can completely understand. But before we get into that, the story this time around it's a continuation of the first movie. Obviously, it's still got Michael Keaton as Batman, still got Tim Burton as the director, still got Michael Goff as Alfred, Pat Hingle as Gordon. Um, Although the movie begins with probably one of the most mean-spirited openings to any comic book movie I've ever seen. It begins with this wealthy couple um, having to put up with this very deformed baby that they just can't stand. So what they do is they go to the park on Christmas. They do this on Christmas, and they dump the baby into the river where it flows into the sewer to be raised by penguins. As if that wasn't weird enough, the penguin's father, he's played by Pee Wee Herman, Paul Rubens. I know his name is Paul Rubens, but let's face it, everyone knows him as Pee Wee Herman. There's a joke in here somewhere, but I'm not in the mood. Cut to years later, it's once again Christmas in Gotham City, and Gotham City seems to be going through a power surplus, and business tycoon Max Schreck, I'll get to his name in a minute, played by Christopher Walken, seeks to develop this power plant that really is just a front for a facility that is going to siphon the power from Gotham City to essentially place him as the guy who holds all of the city's power. However, he is contacted by the mysterious Penguin Man, played by Danny DeVito, and they form an allegiance for some reason, because apparently the Penguin wants to reintegrate back into the society, find himself. However, in addition to that, there's Max Schreck's assistant, played by Michelle Pfeiffer. Her name is Selena Kyle, and after learning of Max Schreck's plans, she's killed by her boss and is reawoken as this crazy thief who goes by the name Catwoman. Oh, and Batman's in there too, somewhere, doing something. Yeah, you probably figured out what one of the major problems of this movie is. In that it amplifies a problem that I had with the first movie. There's barely any Batman in this movie. It is very easy to forget that this is a Batman movie. This is really a movie about the Penguin, Max Schreck, and Catwoman. The villains get more screen time and more of an arc than Batman. Batman is a minor character in this movie. He periodically pops up. And I'm not talking about Batman in full costume. Batman and Bruce Wayne are relegated to minor roles in what is supposed to be a Batman movie. I was saying this the last time, and giving Tim Burton complete free reign this time around only made things worse, because apparently there was a lot of studio control in the first movie, and Tim Burton was reluctant to return. So they said, okay, we'll give you full creative control to do whatever you want, which was a mistake. And I'm not just saying that because I don't like Tim Burton as a filmmaker. I'm saying that's basically saying, we liked what you did with the first movie, now do it again. Do not attempt to make any improvements whatsoever. As a result, this is probably my least favorite of the old Batman series. of the 80s and 90s Batman series. Out of the four movies, this is probably the one I would not watch again because I really, really don't like it. I can't really complain about the acting too much because Michael Keaton is still a perfectly good Batman, even though again he lacks what I feel is the necessary presence. But I'm done tooting that horn. Michelle Pfeiffer is actually very good as Catwoman, although first of all, neither Catwoman nor the Penguin are at all resemble their comic book counterparts. Neither one of them do, not even remotely. Catwoman in the comics and several other iterations was this jewel thief who happened to dress up like a cat. Here they make her just this crazed mental case who trashes her apartment, who drinks milk out of the carton while at the same time it's spilling down her face. She fashions this costume with all these this black spandex costume with all these stitches, these decorative stitches to make her look like some sort of Frankenstein Catwoman. I guess that's what the stitches are for, to kind of make her resemble Frankenstein, which she kind of is, in a way. But even taking that out of it, even taking away the fact that this is not the Catwoman from the comics, as a character in this movie, and solely in this movie, she does a pretty good job. I think she's an interesting character. I think she's a lot of fun. And Michelle Pfeiffer does play her very well. And without a doubt, the best scenes in this movie, to me, are those which are unfortunately few and far between. What I am talking about are the scenes with her and Bruce Wayne kind of just talking about duality and not really being able to get close to anyone and kind of forming this kindred spirit relationship. Honestly, the conversation between her and Batman were the less interesting of the two types. I mean, the conversations that Catwoman has with Batman are just your typical, flirty, almost dominatrix style interactions that you've basically come to expect, except with an added layer of Tim Burton weirdness. While the conversations between Selina Kyle and Bruce Wayne actually feel very interesting, they feel very fitting to these two damaged characters. And yeah, those were the best scenes in the movie. They were the most interesting. They were the most well acted. Michael Keaton and Michelle Pfeiffer do have a fair bit of chemistry. So those scenes were good. However, the people who do not fare quite as well in this movie are Danny DeVito and Christopher Walken. Danny DeVito as the Penguin. He's obviously playing this exaggerate. Well, he's playing a more demented version of Burgess Meredith's Penguin from the original 1966 cartoon. He's kind of doing the waddling. He's kind of speaking in that. Except he's been Burtonized. They gave him these very dark, sunken-in eyes, this big nose, these sharp teeth. They have him a lot of the time when he's talking, and he's spitting, drooling. You see all sorts of liquid come out of this guy's mouth, whether it be blood or drool or whatever. Danny DeVito is just very disgusting as the Penguin. He is just gross. And I'm not saying that like I have. I'm not saying like. I'm trying to get these words out. I'm not saying that like I have a low tolerance for weird or disgusting imagery, because I usually am very stone-faced when it comes to watching movies, or at least movies that might be a little bit too intense or graphic for some people. For example, this may be a bad example since it was since it was 3 or 4 decades ago. But The Exorcist, I didn't really bat an eye at The Exorcist. So I'm not someone who is easily disturbed, and I wasn't really disturbed by the Penguin so much as I was, this guy just seems weird just for the sake of being weird. The fact that they have him as this sewer dwelling penguin hybrid, he even has the webbed hands. Like these are his hands right here. These 3 fingers are essentially fused into one. The fact that they chose to go this route with the Penguin to make him just this sad, pathetic guy could have been an interesting one, but his character is actually pretty inconsistent. Sometimes he's just this very one-dimensional bad guy who just wants to do dastardly deeds for the sake of doing dastardly deeds, and other times he seems to really want to again find himself, find his origins, find out why his parents put him in the sewer, blah blah blah. So his character doesn't really have a whole lot of consistency. He just seems to do whatever the movie tells him to do. And speaking of that, he's not really the orchestrator of a lot of his plans. A lot of his screen time is spent being told or suggested what to do by Max Schreck, Christopher Walken's character. Christopher Walken, who in this movie is just so... It's your typical Christopher Walken character where he kind of acts normal, but at the same time it's that kind of Christopher Walken weirdness that goes in. They don't really take full advantage of Christopher Walken. This character could have been really fun, but again, he's just this typical business tycoon who just wants money. He wants a profit. There's not really a whole lot to this guy. Really, the only indication we get is he wants to leave behind a fortune or leave behind a legacy for his son, whose name I forget because he's barely in the movie. So the villains the 2 villains are not really all that memorable. The anti-hero Catwoman is actually far more interesting in my opinion. But again, where's Batman in all this? Batman, again, is just a minor character. And speaking of that, the plot that goes around these 3 villains, the 3 villains are what the plot revolves around. Not Batman, the 3 villains, or the 2 villains and the anti-hero. But a lot of what this movie is just weird for the sake of being weird. It really is this sort of prototypical Tim Burton movie where you will just have these odd and at times kind of off-putting moments, and then the characters just treat it like normal. And if you like that, if you like that kind of random dark humor without much in the way of any context, then you will probably like this movie. But for the most part, I just found this movie to be very off-putting, very kind of unpleasant. Because a lot of what is in this movie is just very mean-spirited. And on top of that, the plot doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Several storylines, not only do they not go anywhere, but they just based on concept, I couldn't really see them working on paper. For some reason, Max Schreck is not able to get the current mayor, played by Michael Murphy, to support his power plants or to support him as a businessman. So his solution is to convince the Penguin to run for mayor. What? You get this sewer-dwelling penguin man without any political experience whatsoever to run for mayor. And it works, for a while anyway. The citizens of Gotham are apparently so easily led that they will vote for this penguin guy over Mayor Michael Murphy over here. It kind of reminds me of that Bill Engvall stand-up where he was talking about the 19-year-old kid who ran for mayor. And then he basically made the point, how bad a job was that other guy doing? That the people were like, yeah, we're going with the kid. Um, Obviously, it's a little bit of a different context, but it's the same basic idea. And you could theoretically make the argument, well, to a certain extent, the Penguin might get some sort of sympathy vote from the people because his redemption story is basically all over the media. It's in the newspapers, it's on TV, it's everywhere. The Penguin becomes essentially a celebrity. But again, if you stop to think about this, even for a second, then it completely falls apart because again, this guy has no political experience. He doesn't really have a whole lot in the way of social experience. He doesn't really seem all that upbeat to be mayor. It was just a really dumb plot line that again didn't really go anywhere. And what else? Oh, Catwoman. Catwoman is pushed, or Selina Kyle is pushed out of like a 3-story window by Max Schreck because she knows too much. And she is literally resuscitated by a bunch of alley cats coming and nibbling on her body. Okay, well, you could make the argument that she crashed into a bunch of things coming on the way down that broke her fall. So she might have been only unconscious on the ground. But afterwards, she magically has these ninja skills. She can magically fight almost as well as Batman. She's doing all these flips and kicks. She fashions this costume on the same night that she almost gets murdered, and she literally has 9 lives. Maybe taking this a little too far with the whole cat thing. Granted, it's not quite as ridiculous as the Halle Berry Catwoman, but they were kind of starting to go into that territory. I'm not saying this movie is as bad or as incompetently made as the Halle Berry Catwoman, but even so, you can see how my suspension of disbelief was pretty stretched. So there's that. And even the fact that there are 3 villains that in a movie where there really doesn't need to be, because this whole movie fundamentally has this problem in terms of who it wants to focus on. It wants to focus on Catwoman, it wants to focus on the Penguin, it wants to focus on Max Schreck. It's like Tim Burton was looking at all of these new freaks, like Catwoman, Penguin, Max Schreck. It's like he took a look at them, him and the writers. He took a look at these characters and said these characters are so interesting. And then maybe the writer said, well, what about Batman? And Tim Burton's like, oh, just stick him in there somewhere. And this is why I don't really like these older Batman movies all that much, because they don't realize what a good thing they've got in Batman. They just focus on the villain of the week. They just focus on, now granted, the Tim Burton movies, at least there is at least a sense of style that kind of fits the Batman character. There is this kind of stylish gothic setting that fits the character of Batman and his rogues gallery. So at least there's that. But this, but even so, this movie tries to apply the same tone that it had with the first one to things that are mean-spirited and a lot of the time just stupid. The Penguin rides around in this duckmobile, this big boat thing that's in the shape of a rubber duck. The Penguin straps these fireworks or these explosives to the backs of his Penguin minions, and he sends them out to Gotham. What? This seems like something that would be at home in the 60s Batman. We're actually expected to take this seriously. This movie is not dark. It's just off-putting, weird, and stupid. And the fact that they do play these scenes as very dark and try to integrate them in the same movie, where this in the same movie with all of these serious scenes, like this relationship between Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle's damaged psyche. The fact that they try to mix in these elements while trying to give this this very dark tone really gives the movie this very off-putting this very off-putting attitude, this very, again, mean-spirited attitude. I really did not enjoy this movie at all, and even the things that remain good in this movie from the last movie, Danny Elfman's musical score, the sets, both of which are fantastic. Again, they don't really bring anything too new to the table, and even the sets they completely up the weirdness. Again, probably a result of giving Tim Burton too much creative control. They just up the weirdness. There are several things in the background that just don't make sense. I mean, the costumes of the minions, of the multiple denizens of Gotham don't really make sense. I feel like I just stepped into Cirque du Soleil. And speaking of that, where does Penguin get minions in the sewer? I can understand having penguin minions, but where does he get henchmen? Where does he get off becoming this crime boss if he's lived in the sewers all his life? Where does he get the technology, the resources, or even the intelligence to fashion these multiple different umbrellas? This helicopter umbrella, this knife umbrella, this machine gun umbrella. Where does he get the resources for that? How does he do this? So again, this movie doesn't make sense. The whole thing has this very cruel nature to it that makes for pretty unpleasant viewing. There are good things about it. Like I said, the character of Catwoman, even though she is clearly not the same Catwoman from the comics, is fairly interesting, and her repertoire with Bruce Wayne does make for some pretty compelling scenes. And like I said, the music and the sets, as weird as they can get at times, are still pretty substantial. They are still pretty solid. However, there's way too much there are way too many instances in this movie of weird just for the sake of being weird. And again, it all comes back to Tim Burton having just complete free reign to do whatever he wanted. He was perfectly content to make just this weird Gotham City. He was just perfectly content to make this weird freak show movie instead of a Batman movie. And that's my biggest problem. This feels even less like a Batman movie than his previous one. Yeah, and sadly, the series only went downhill from here.